Pokémon World is incredibly diverse. We've got bustling cities with plenty of nature and wildlife inside, and environments that are quite rare in our real world even, like deserts and volcanoes that seem to pop up a lot more in the Pokémon regions we visit. But thinking about all this made me wonder, what is the most common location type or environment in the Pokémon world, as we've seen it at least in the mainline games? And so I went past every region and counted up how often certain biomes and environments pop up, and I have to say, I did not expect the final answer. Let me know what you think the most common one is before we start the countdown. And to give you some thinking time, I want to begin with the ground rules. Every location in the Pokémon main series games counts only once. That means that if a location returns in a remake or when revisiting Kanto and Johto games, it does not count again. After all, it's the same place in the Pokémon world, just portrayed differently. However, locations newly introduced in remakes or third versions do count. So for example, the Kanto Safari Zone only counts once, despite being a location that appears in multiple games set in Kanto. The Johto Safari Zone also counts once, despite not existing in the original Johto games and being newly introduced in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Everything in Hisui that already existed in Sinnoh with the same name, like Snow Point Temple for example, also is only counted once. What I haven't counted is cities and towns, for the simple reason that I want to focus more on nature and the places where Pokémon actually live. Other locations that don't have wild Pokémon have not been counted for the same reason. I don't consider those to fit the spirit of what we're going for here. If a place houses only a legendary Pokémon, it will only count if you had to travel a substantial amount through that area in order to reach it. Numbered routes only count towards one of the categories if they have a clear theme that is either visible or mentioned in their map description. The simple fact of the matter is that many routes are some fake mix between grassland, foresty, road-like areas that aren't really defined to be part of any specific environment. So only routes that do have that clear distinction visible somewhere will count. Routes that hit several themes at once will in the majority of cases only count towards one category instead of nitpicking every single one that might fit. This is to prevent a small pond counting as a water route, for example. Exceptions have been made in extreme cases though, like Mount Pyre, which truly is 50% indoors and 50% Spooky Mountain. For the Blueberry Academy's Terrarium, I decided to give 2 points to every theme that is significantly featured here, even if those overlap. Since this place doesn't have distinct areas, I felt like that was the best way to count it. But it also immediately shows that you should not take the exact number here to be gospel. There are way too many ifs, buts and maybes around for the numbers to be taken as cold hard facts, especially thanks to the open world games ditching routes and early games having routes that are very hard to specify what they really are meant to be. I have zero doubt the ranking itself is correct, but the numbers are more meant to be taken roughly instead of purely factual. Okay, with that said, we can officially kick things off with the lowest ranking environment that I still consider common enough to give its own place on the list. It had a significant enough gap from the honorable mentions that you will see at the end of the video, so it kinda naturally felt like a good starting point. And the location type I'm talking about here is Snowlands. In total, 19 areas in the Pokémon world as we have visited it fall into this category. For those of you watching who have joined the series a little later, say around the 3DS, and so don't have a ton of affinity with the older games, that might actually be a bit of a surprise, and I can understand why. Simply put, if you redo this video in say 10 or 20 years, Snowlands would probably be a whole lot higher. The majority of their 19 points come from the later games, with the very first Snowland not appearing until Gen 4, with Sinnoh's Route 216 and 17 and Acuity Lakefront. They would then not appear in Unova before beginning a mighty streak that continues until today in Kalos, where Route 17 is a snowy landscape for example. But for the real winter wonderlands and the vast majority of points, we need to look at the Switch games, which gave us several big areas that are covered in snow. The Crown Tundra has 4 areas worth of snowlands, plus 1 route on mainland Galar as well. Hisui has 5 areas worth of snow points, many in the Alabaster Icelands of course. While mainland Paldea only has Mount Glaciado for 1 point, an ice environment is part of the Terrarium, scoring it another 2 points. And then you have to keep in mind that I don't hand out points for areas that turn snowy under circumstances only, as is seen in for example Unova during winter or in the wild area. Point being, snowlands are becoming more and more common with recent games, so unlike some other areas on this list, this is actually one I can only see going up. And if that were to happen, it would first have to get past beaches, which have appeared 24 times across the different Pokémon regions. Beaches have technically existed since Gen 1, although I did not count Route 19 since the vast majority of it is a water route instead, meaning that beaches instead scored their first point somewhere else near Kanto, being Treasure Beach on the Sevii Islands. Johto also doesn't have one, but from Hoenn onwards, every single region would have at least one beach to count. Hoenn and Sinnoh have a big 3 beaches, while Unova, Kalos and Galar only have 1, so it kinda goes all over the place. It shouldn't be a big surprise that the island region of Alola contributes a lot as well, with 4 beaches in total, but the real big supplier is actually Hisui, which has a total of 6 beaches, with Ginkgo Landing, Castaway Shore and Alpi Shore among others. Another 4 points come from Scarlet and Violet, with 2 in Paldea and another 2 points from the Terrarium. In general, these are not exactly spectacular areas and probably cover the smallest amount of land out of all these categories, although I haven't done the math on that as well. That said, I do want to quickly highlight Alola's Route 14, which is unique in this category for being a beach with black sand. But anyway, similar to Snowlands, the majority of beaches are found later down the generations, so perhaps this is another locale that could be looking at closing the gap upwards. In the next spot, we find one of the first truly defined environments the series ever saw: forests, or woods, groves, thickets and even free jungles. There's Lush Jungle, Hoenn Route 119 and Sinnoh Route 229. Either way, all of these count up to around 25 points, which is a lot less than I expected. But it makes sense when you think about it. Most regions have a clearly defined and usually kinda big forest. Think Viridian Forest, Pinwheel Forest, Centaloon Forest, etc. But that's still only 1 point, and very few regions have more than one of those areas. There are games that score more than 1 point for forest though, like Kanto, which has Route 15 going up to Bill's house, which doesn't look like a forest, but the map description leaves no discussion possible. This is a forest, it's just not portrayed in a way we would instantly recognize it. Another region with multiple forests is Hisui. It has 4, which is the highest of any region. The Hardwood is a super obvious one, which I did count since it's a different name than Eterna Forest, even if it's probably supposed to be the same thing. I had to draw the line somewhere. Another point from this game comes from Deadwood Hound, which is a wooded area, just with dead trees, making it hard to recognize as one. Paldea has a very respectable free forest, with So Carrot Hill possibly being the most beautiful forest of all, with its super unique autumn theme. We have seen this before in Akritique City and it's also in Unova, but this is the only autumn forest that actually results in points. Now, forests are another environment that have seen their numbers increased over time, but not to the same degree as beaches and especially snowlands. The open world games have more forests than the early generations do, but the future Pokémon games will continue with a similar environmental spread as say Scarlet and Violet, Legends Arceus and Sword and Shield, then forests will eventually be beaten by snowlands and probably beaches too. The only reason they're ahead is that, unlike those two, they are actually present in older games as well. I mean, this is the first environment in this video that's found in Johto, that says enough. Next we're gonna make a bit of a jump from Forest's 25 points to the 32 points of the man-made areas. This is a very diverse group that has cycled through several names throughout my research. It started as indoor, as that is what the locations mostly were at first, but as the generations continued, more and more areas that aren't indoors but wouldn't exist and house wild Pokémon without severe human intervention would appear. You can also call it urban, whatever you prefer. So, like I said, this was initially a purely indoor environment. Think Pokémon Mansion, the power plants, the 4 towers of the first 2 regions, and the abandoned sites of Hoenn, like the 2 Mauville's, the abandoned ship, and as mentioned before, Mount Pyre. The first that tested the term indoors was the National Park, which initially had been listed under Protected Habitat, a category that ended up deleted, and would have featured locations like the Safari Zones. Eventually, I decided that's not really the same kind of environmental category as the rest, so I cut it, which retrospectively made National Park the first non-indoors man-made area. Later generations would have destroyed that definition anyway, especially Unova, which is probably the most urbanized region, and it shows here big time. We're talking Flockacy Ranch, Cold Storage, the Verbank Complex, the Dream Yard, Castelia Sewers. All are not indoors, but would not have Pokemon on their premises like they do if it wasn't for human intervention somewhere along the way. Now, this is another category that has really suffered from the step towards open world game design. The Crown Tundra has a cemetery at least, which I did count, but Hisui and Paldea don't have any areas like this. Hisui has an excuse of course, but for Paldea it's the very clear effect of not being able to enter any houses whatsoever, so there's no place for a spooky house or anything either. Kitakami did get 1 point for Apple Hills, which is an orchard, but it pales in comparison to what earlier games would score. So yeah, on one hand I would say this category needs to worry. It fits linear games much more than open world ones, and that's not the direction Pokemon is heading. But at the same time, we have a Pokemon game entirely set in a city coming up, so maybe these urban locales aren't as doomed as the numbers currently suggest. We make another big 10-point jump next for another category that combines multiple very similar styles of environments together, and that is what I ended up calling Body of Water, with 41 points. Now, what does that mean? For the purpose of this video, it's every route or area with water as a pronounced theme without it being the sea or the ocean. Think Lake of Rage in Johto, the lakes in Sinnoh, Castle Royale Lake, but also Brooklet Hill in Alola and Unova's Route 14 and 20, which are the first in the series to really be themed after rivers. This is another environment that only exists in Kanto if you consider the Sevii Islands part of it, with Cape Rink. If not, they debuted in Johto with the aforementioned Lake of Rage, but also the Dragon's Den and Route 35, which doesn't appear to be super big in-game, but the description calls it a lake the route is built around, so I figured I'd count it. The region with the most of these locales are found on the Switch, with Galar having 6, with the wild area alone having 3 lakes already, and Hisui, which has a total of 7, ranging from rivers to lakes to a waterfall and even a hot spring. Kitakami also has a lot compared to its smaller size, with 4 in total, with the Crystal Lake of course the most noteworthy. So once again, I can tell you this is a locale which is scoring very well in recent Pokemon games, especially DLC areas for some strange reason, and it makes sense too. If you're creating an open world, you're gonna include lakes, rivers and more to break up the landscape. Linear games didn't have that as much, and it shows in the numbers. This is definitely another one to keep an eye on for the future, it could very well rise. And we go from one water-themed locale to the other, because one position higher, with exactly 50 points, we have water routes, i.e. the sea and the ocean. Routes where almost everything is an unsurrounded pool of water. Now, I think we all need to apologize to IGN, because I have to say, they have the numbers on their side. Hoenn has an unprecedented 16 water routes, which is genuinely insane. Almost a third of every single water route in the Pokemon series is found in Hoenn, and I'll even do you one better. Nearly half of all water routes, or seas and oceans, were introduced in Gen 3. 16 in Hoenn and another 6 in the Sevii Islands. Mind you, that means the Sevii Islands have more water routes than Kanto, despite being significantly smaller. Sure, it's an island archipelago, but so is Alola and that only has 2. But there's one more thing about Hoenn's water routes that I think I have to acknowledge. Not a single environment in the Pokémon world appears more in one region than water routes do in Hoenn. In other words, the 16 points it scored here is the highest number of points handed out for a category in any region. And that includes base Galar plus both DLC areas, which are considered part of the same region. It's wild, and while of course I expected water routes to get most of their points here, I had not expected numbers to be this extreme. But yeah, you can definitely see Game Freak themselves might have also thought they went a bridge too far here, because following Hoenn, water routes would decrease in numbers with every game until they reached a base 2 or 3 areas every game, which has persisted so far. The only outlier is Galar, which thanks to the Isle of Armor has a total of 6, but that still pales in comparison to Hoenn. We continue up the ladder and make it to the top 3. Would you believe it? Time goes so fast when you're having fun. Anyway, for our bronze medalist, we have truly the first environment we ever see in Pokemon, albeit a little undefined at first. grasslands, also counting meadows, plains and fields. This was by far the hardest area to count, because many routes at first sight kinda look like they fit, but then they also have trees along the way, and because there are paths, calling them fields and truly grasslands also feels incorrect. So most of this category's points come from routes that have mentions of being grasslands or fields in their map description. Kanto Route 11 is a good example. I have never seen this route as a meadow personally, but Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee have that stated in the map description, and who am I to fight that? Now, of course, it's not all this difficult. The safari zones are very obviously grasslands, as is Unova Route 12 for example. You also have several meadows filled with flowers in Alola, making that the region with the most grasslands and fields in the Pokémon world as we know it today. I personally expected that to be Hisui, but they're only really found in the Obsidian Fieldlands, and that has plenty of other environments as well, so in the end it ended up with 6 points there. That's less than Galar even, which has several open zones that do contribute points. It's not just the wild area, even if that is the biggest point gainer. As you should probably expect from a bronze medalist, grasslands are present in every single Pokémon region and truly score points from all over the generations. Some have more, some have less, but they're just consistently present, and that's understandable. What I do find interesting though is that out of all categories, grasslands are probably the biome that was least affected by the step to open world. It didn't gain a significant amount of points, but it also didn't lose any. It's remained steady, and that is a great virtue in and of itself, and shows how much this is a reliable environment to cram full with Pokémon. But still, the gap towards our number 2 is quite large, almost 30 points, because finishing as runner-up are rocky, mountainous roads with 84 points. Just like the body of water category earlier, this is another very diverse group. It includes actual mountains we can walk on, like Oni Mountain in Kitakami, but also Vast Pony Canyon, area free of Paldea's East Province, which is like a mining quarry, and Ruin Valley on the Sevi Islands. Basically put, this is every area that is characterized by these landforms that can best be described as a huge difference in elevation. What it doesn't include are areas that are mostly small hills or volcanoes, but things like mountains, canyons, cliff sides, valleys, they all went into this category. And yeah, there are a lot of these places of all kinds scattered all throughout the Pokémon world. Some make my job very easy, like Johto Route 45, which is straight up called Mountain Road in the map description. Others make my job a lot harder, like the 2 mountain roads in Kanto are nearly missed because they only exist in Johto games, Route 26 and 28. Big suppliers of mountain roads are Paldea, Alola and Unova, which all have 10, but they do lose out to the champion of mountains, Hisui, which has 11. And yeah, that checks out. Not only does it have a zone dedicated to this theme, the Coronet Highlands, the game plays a lot with elevation in general. There is not a single area in Hisui which doesn't score at least 1 point for this theme. Similar to grasslands, these are just super consistent, have appeared in very good numbers in every region, and I do not see them disappearing anytime soon. It says enough that the least amount of points mountainous areas have ever scored in full-fledged regions is 4, both in Johto and Kalos. That's still a pretty decent amount that won't see you get caught up with anytime soon. Now, we have one more area to go, and like I said in my intro, I did not expect this one. And the reason for that is the discourse around it. I have seen many people say this type of environment is dead and buried, but actually the numbers say the opposite. The grand winner of this video is none other than caves. If you have played every single mainline Pokémon game, you have gone through 94 proper caves in your journey, and that is a number no area can beat. But like I said, it surprised me. The open world titles should have ended this type of environment. That's what I've seen in the community so many times, yet somehow caves have ended up on top. How is that possible? Well, while the numbers do suggest that those fears were maybe a little much, at the same time they also explain why that sentiment arose. So, caves do score the majority of their points in the linear games, specifically in the ones that I suspect most people consider the golden era. More than half of caves in the Pokémon world appear in the regions from before the jump to 3D in X and Y. In fact, Kalos has half the numbers of caves that Unova and Sinnoh have, so the decrease there was pretty significant and abrupt. Another very interesting statistic can be found in Galar, the game that first experimented with open world mechanics and I think really kickstarted this discussion around caves. But in total, this region has a pretty high 8 caves. But here's the kicker. Only 2 of those are in the base game. 6 of them are added through the DLC, which of course doesn't have as big an impact on the community as the main game does. Hisui also has a lot of caves, one more even at 9, but Paldea does scale things back down again, with only 3 in the actual region itself. So yeah, caves were indeed more prominent back when the series was sprite-based, that is a cold hard fact. But at the same time, it's still one of the most common environments in the modern games. Its lead is just not as big as it once was. But make no mistake, out of the 10 full-fledged regions, Hisui included, caves are the most common location in 6 of them. And some of those missing out are only because Hoenn loves water too much and Alola and Paldea prefer mountainous areas over full-on caves. Even Kalos, which number-wise kicked off the decline of caves, has this environment as the most common one. Again, the lead is just smaller. But enough about that. Let's end with the king of caves, Sinnoh. Not only is it the region with the most caves in Pokemon history, it also has probably the largest. Mount Coronet set the record the moment it was released and didn't lose it until the Switch remakes introduced the Grand Underground, a huge cave system underneath the entire region of Sinnoh. And that's still 1 point, just as much as the nearly empty Artisan Cave. Now, our winner has been crowned, but I promised honorable mentions, so I want to quickly pass by those. The most common environment that didn't get its own separate slot in the video are deserts. The big problem for this environment is that it covers a huge amount of ground, but all under the same name. You could easily fill several routes with desert landscapes, but that doesn't happen. Instead, you have the Desert Resort or Hana Desert, huge areas that earn only 1 point. Very few games earn more than 1 point for this biome and some don't have it at all, although it has become a mainstay in more recent generations, so if I redo this video in 20 years, maybe it will be higher up then. And at least lovers of this biome always have ore to rally behind. Wetlands or swamps also just missed out with 11 points. These 2 barely existed before Gen 4 when the Great Marsh did lead to a memorable opener. Even though Hisui really tried with the Crimson Mirelands and Unova 2 has multiple wetlands, these simply are a tad too uncommon to really hit a stride. 2 environments I did single out and didn't include in the urban category are paved roads and bridges. Both are by far the most common in Unova, which has a total of 6 bridges and 4 paved roads, which is more than 3rd place Forest, for example. But simply put, they are not common enough. There's the occasional cycling road for a paved path or Nugget Bridge for a bridge, but especially in modern games, these 2 categories are basically non-existent. The smallest category that I did single out because I expected it to do a bit better is a volcanic environment. Now, the overlap with mountains is definitely there, but nah, the number ended up so low it was insignificant. Volcanic areas are at the end of the day only found in a handful of regions, and some of those don't even count, like Cinnabar Island's volcano. And even if they have them, and they count, it's only 1 point, except for Alola, which has 2 named routes with a volcanic theme. So yeah, overestimation on my part there maybe. And that has been everything the numbers told me to tell you. Did you expect a winner? And what other results surprised you? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.